Hello. All right. Welcome to week 6. Yeah, week 6 of organized crime. This week's topic is organized crime in Latin America and Africa. Textbook with textbook calls Afrolineal organized crime. This week, for my lecture, I'm just going to focus on a couple of specifics. Part 1 of this week's video will be about Mexican DTOs, Mexican drug trafficking organizations called DTOs, and then second part of the lecture this week will be about organized crime in West Africa. I picked those two as my lecture foci because of what is currently planned on the final exam. There is a question on the final exam about comparing and contrasting the Mexican drug cartels and examining the relationship between NAFTA and the ascendants of Mexican cartels, or DTOs. And then there is also a question on the final exam that specifically talks about organized crime in Nigeria compared to organized crime in other parts of Africa. And so I'm going to talk a bit about, so that's why I will talk about organized crime in West Africa as kind of a way to give you a prep, give you a little more information about organized crime in the region of Africa where Nigeria is located. And so, but I start, like I said, part 1 of this week's lecture will be Mexican DTOs. Before I get started, I just want to remind you that your term paper should be submitted to the submission box on the website no later than midnight on the Monday of week 7, which is next week. Please make sure you get that turned in on time. Please submit, if at all possible, in a Microsoft Word document or something converted to a PDF. I know some of you don't have Microsoft Word. If you can convert that to a PDF file with whatever software you're using, I would recommend that, just because that's your way of saving your formatting. Some students who don't have Microsoft Word have turned in documents before in a different format. And what ends up happening when I open the files, and the only way I have to open the files at work is to open them through Microsoft Word, and the conversion process sometimes ruins the formatting, and I have no way of telling if you got the formatting right, and so it ends up costing students some points. Now, not tons of points, but still, points is points. And so, try to, if at all possible, submit your papers through with in a Microsoft Word format or PDF. But if you can't, I understand. I mean, that's Microsoft has been forever and always really proud of their products, and so they like to charge an arm and a leg for their stuff. So I certainly understand if you don't have copies of it. What else? There is if you want to use Turnitin.com as a way to check to make sure you're not having any issues or potential issues with plagiarism, areas you might want to paraphrase better. The course ID for this class is 4694634, and as always, the password is CJ-Tiger. All right, enough of that. Mexican drug trafficking organizations. As of 2009, 90% of cocaine coming into the United States comes through the nation of Mexico. And Mexican drug trafficking organizations, from henceforth referred to as DTOs, are considered the greatest drug trafficking threat to the United States. The problem is not just the Mexican cartels, though. It is U.S. action that has affected other trafficking routes. For a long time, Mexican organizations were handling the trafficking or doing some of the moving of the product for for the Colombian cartels and for the cartels out of Bolivia and Peru. Well, when the Medellin and Medellin and Cali cartels were shattered, we talked a bit about the Medellin and the Cali cartels, and we talked about drug trafficking in general a while back. You can read about those again in your textbook. When those cartels were brought down, there was a bit of a power vacuum in the drug trafficking trade, and the Mexican organizations that were already smuggling the drugs in just took advantage of that power vacuum and became moved beyond just trafficking, but into the production and then wholesale retail distribution. I kind of made a list looking at some various sources. I made a list of 4 issues that are predominantly affecting the drug trade between Mexico and U.S. 4 things that I would say here are, I don't know if they're causes for, I'm not sure I want to call them all causes for the current predicament that we're in with the violence and the drug trafficking through Mexico. But these are things that have major influence on that drug trade, or the drugs going across the border. And the first of 4 on my list is the demand for illegal drugs in the United States. The reality is the U.S. market for illegal narcotics is somewhere around $140 billion a year. Why is it worth $140 billion a year? Well, partially because of U.S. drug policy, making the narcotics illegal, which creates opportunity for organized crime, but also because of the failure of U.S. drug policy or U.S. social policy to reduce demand. We've made this illegal, but making something illegal in and of itself is not sufficient to reduce the demand for the product. And so, we have things like public service announcements and in-school programs and things trying to reduce the demand, trying to discourage people from using drugs, reduce the demand, and really those policies, in at least some part, have failed. And so we have a large demand for illegal narcotics. The second on my list of issues is economic realities. It may come as a surprise to some of you, but Mexico is our second largest trade partner, and so we rely heavily on imports and exports to and from Mexico. And as a result, we have some policies while our criminal justice agencies, FBI, ATF, Border Patrol, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, all those agencies are trying to tighten border security and close the border and make it more difficult for illegal immigrants and illegal contraband, and legal contraband, for contraband across the border. At the same time, economic realities demand a more open border to ease import and export of goods. And so things, pieces of legislation like NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, opens the border and makes it easier for the smugglers to get things across. The third thing on my list would be the rise of the Mexican drug trafficking organizations. And I've already mentioned that the fall of the cartels created vast opportunity for someone to take over. And you already have these family-based organizations like the Herrera family, who were already in place, were already doing the movement, were already handling the trafficking phase of the drug trade. And so there was the opportunity there for them to move into the production and the wholesale and retail distribution phases of the drug trade and increase their profits. Add on to that because they were doing the trafficking, these Mexican organizations had already had the relationships they needed that would foster relationships with U.S. street gangs and prison gangs that they would need to facilitate the wholesale and retail distribution. And then fourth and finally on my list is the political situation in Mexico. Prior to the last decade, there were lots of calls for, lots of complaints about corruption in the Mexican government. But the reality is, in 2000, when President Vicente Fox took office in Mexico and declared war on the cartels, rather than being a solution, what ended up happening was a vast increase in violence in Mexico as the federal government attempted to combat drug smuggling in Mexico. In 2007, when Felipe Calderon took office, he continued. President Calderon, who was still, of course, president of Mexico, has continued President Fox's programs in combating the drug trafficking organization, but he's kind of stepped things up a little by cracking down on internal government corruption. He's done it to the point of suspending entire police departments in Mexico, taking local Mexican police out of the picture, and bringing in federal troops or federales, causing an even greater increase in the violence. In Mexico today, there are 4 major cartels operating, and I want to kind of tell you a little bit about each one. Again, I'm not going to go into huge detailed histories of these guys, but just a little detail, kind of hopefully to supplement what's in the book. Some of it may repeat, some may supplement. Anyway, it'd help you study. Remember, there's a test question about comparing and contrasting the different cartels, and so hopefully this will give you a little more information to do that with. At least, to give you stuff from lecture to incorporate into your answer. The first of the 4 major cartels I want to talk about is the Tijuana cartel. This is Arellano Felix's This is the Arellano Felix organization. Has been a major player in Mexican drug trade since the mid-1980s. It uses, the Tijuana cartel, their territory is, let's see, I don't have, there may be a picture of that cartel's territory in your textbook. And I've got, let's see, that's my South American stuff. That's West Africa. Oh, fiddles. I had a nice map I was going to show you of that area, and I seem to have lost my pretty little map. Hold on. I have my pretty little map. Drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. I'm going to give you, it's just going to give you kind of hard to give you a screenshot of this. And I think there is a similar map in your textbook. I just kind of like this one when I find it. But when you see this map, you'll notice that the Tijuana cartel, their territory is not especially large. But when you look at their territory, hello. Maybe still on. When you look at their territory, and maybe I just don't have it, you have to see if you can find a map of the Tijuana cartel's territory. Oh, there it is. Okay, you'll notice on the map, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you'll notice on the map, if you see the Tijuana cartel, they don't have a whole lot of territory there. There's another, well, that's a good map. Okay, so you see there's the map of the different cartels, and you'll notice the Tijuana cartel, these are these little guys up here in this little small circle, and they don't have a lot of territory, at least geographic location. But they've got a pretty good spot, because if you notice, this spot here is Baja California. There's a lot of traffic going into, not Texas, but into California. And so they get a lot of their money not just from trafficking, but they use a lot of fees and tolls, and they allow other cartels, other DTOs, other organizations to use their territory, to operate in their territory, to smuggle into Southern California. And that is where a lot of their money comes from, is they sell permits and tolls. They do have, in addition to that, they do their own trafficking and selling. They have strong ties to some of the groups in South America, such as they are. And they have ties to Russian organized crime. An interestingly unique, well, not unique, but interesting thing about them is they, to protect themselves, to confirm the loyalty of their soldiers, they conduct electronic monitoring and surveillance of U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency personnel and other government agencies. They monitor mail and trash of these folks, and what they're looking for are the names of their own people in DEA documents that might give them a clue that maybe one of their members has gone over to the law side. They have recently suffered some setbacks. There is the arrest and expedition, the arrest and expedition of the Aurelio Felix brothers. Most of them have been arrested or killed. There originally were 7 of these guys. There's only a couple of them left that haven't been arrested or killed. They gained some of their power back. They had some alliances with the Juarez and the Sinaloa cartels, and when those alliances dissolved, they managed to suck up a little power for themselves. And like a lot of other deep Mexican DTOs, know that they are fairly quick to bring in outside help. They may do it either through hiring other organizations or bring in their own police force that they call La Linea for security and enforcement. Let's see. The second group, second of my big 4 is the Gulf Cartel. The Gulf Cartel is led by Asiel Calderon Guillen. Guillen was arrested in 2003, got a 10-year prison sentence, is still in charge of the Gulf Cartel, and has been running it from prison. Know that he was arrested in 2003, which means his sentence will be up, next year. I'll have to rewrite these textbooks and sources when he gets released, I suppose. The Gulf Cartel experienced massive growth in the 1990s when it transitioned from simple smuggling to straight into direct sales, wholesale retail sales. Unfortunately, that move also brought them into conflict with the Sinaloa cartel, and that conflict encouraged them to garner some outside help. And so in 2002, they turned to a group of federales, Mexican federal soldiers, and convinced them to leave the military and become their own enforcers. These particular military individuals were quite possibly members of a special group within the Mexican Army who had been especially trained by U.S. military forces at Fort Benning and Fort Bragg, specifically in counter drug trafficking operations, and the Gulf Cartel convinced these guys to become their enforcers. This paramilitary group that they have created from this foundation of ex-federal military or ex-federal police are now known as Los Zetas, and they are, of course, Los Zetas. This name comes from their old radio code of Z. They have since broken off from the Gulf Cartel and formed their own DTO, but they are vicious. They are probably one of the nastiest or the most efficient of these private police forces used by the cartel. When they were part of the Gulf Cartel, they handled security. They handled taking care of competitors. The Gulf Cartel, the Los Zetas themselves currently operate in small cells all throughout Mexico, so they have some territory that they claim for themselves. The Zetas are led by a couple of the original group, Heriberto Lozano and Miguel Trevino. These guys, according to the Congressional Research Service, have a reward of $7 million for their capture. And the Zetas have expanded their work. They've gone beyond They've gone beyond doing security for the cartels. They have gone into different things like murder for hire. They've gone into their own drug trade. Unlike many of the other, unlike the Big Four, Los Zetas has also gone into legitimate businesses. Particularly car lots and liquor stores and restaurants. And much like the Big Four, they do get involved in other alliances with other cartels and with major gangs like the MS-13s. But back to the Gulf Cartel. The Gulf Cartel themselves, they do their recruiting. They tend to recruit from members of the MS-13. They recruit from the Guatemala Cabeles, which is a Guatemala Special Operations unit. And the Gulf Cartel right now, approximate size is about 1,200 members, and have strong connections in Dallas, Laredo, and Houston. Let's see. Major cartel number 3 is the Sinaloa cartel, Sinaloa cartel. They are major cocaine traffickers, though they also traffic in opium and marijuana, but their specialization is cocaine. They are in the past. They've found themselves in conflict with the Tijuana cartel, which weakened them for a time, but they have experienced a resurgence in the last few years. They're currently led by Joaquin Guzman Lorenzo, or El Chapo. This guy is got a little infamy attached to him. He's at one point was captured, arrested, was spending some time in a Mexican prison, and in 2001 escaped, and is still in the free, still running loose. Has a fairly sizable bounty of his own. He's worth about $5 million if caught. But I'm sure he's not worried. El Chapo is one of these guys that certainly can afford to pay anyone to top the bounty. One source that I read said that his approximate worth is about $1 billion, which is enough to get him on the list of Forbes' most wealthiest men. We'll get him to the top, but we'll get him on the list.